is here. Janice, are you set to go?
I'm on live.
Okay, good. All right, well, I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I hope you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes that anyone would like to see made to the agenda for tonight?
No.
Hearing none, the agenda is approved as circulated. How about changes to the minutes from last month's board meeting?
I have
Suggested changes?
Did you get the corrected ones? I have to apologize. I was late in getting the ZB minutes to Secretary Meyer, and he got them back to me, and I made the changes and sent it to David to blast out for me. So if you don't have a watermark that says 329, you have the wrong minutes.
Oh, I got 309.
I got 309.
It's 329 with corrected minutes after I got Peter's changes.
Well, then we'll assume they're all correct.
Well, I have one minor change, and I think it helps make things make sense.
Would you like this?
Could I? Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
It's all right.
On the last page, where it says, Philip, she liked the plans and illustrations presented.
All right, yeah, I bring up the minutes, I'll make the change. Last page.
Yeah. And then I said, as the buildable area on the lot was not specific according to the minutes, and I think, however, not as. Or but, it doesn't matter.
Okay, she liked the plans and illustrations presented as,
However, instead of as,
however.
yeah.
Okay. And scratch as, got it.
Thank you. That's my only change that I saw.
Okay. Any other suggested changes to last month's minutes? Okay. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval or made.
As amended.
Yeah, so you're moving to approve as amended, and we have a second to my right.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Next item on our agenda is public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anybody here tonight that wants to talk to us about something that's not already on our agenda? There usually isn't. Okay, then we're on to action items. Item 1 is a kind of a different item for us. It's Zoning Board of Appeals text interpretation of section 2906C4. And David, I think probably if you could tell us a little bit about what this is about, just
Sure.
to get it on the record.
Sure. So this issue came up, I believe it was May of last year, and it resurfaced with our meeting last month in March. So we, as you all know, we have a new zoning ordinance. It's now roughly 2.5 years old. Many things were changed, many things were added, but one of the things that was added was in the decision criteria, number 4 specifically, the reasonable amount, the language was changed. I gave every one of you a copy, the handout. So in the 2003 zoning ordinance, decision criteria number 4, the variance is a reasonable amount necessary to mitigate the practical difficulty. So the township has always, and the ZBA has always, used the reasonableness amount standard when reviewing decision criteria. With the adoption of the 2020 zoning ordinance, decision criteria 4, reasonable amount, the variance is the minimum amount necessary to mitigate the practical difficulty. That word minimum is a change, and at the time it was a proposed change from the township's consultant. It was part of a 17-page document illustrating and listing changes that would be included in the zoning ordinance that would be approved ultimately by the board in October of 2020. Unbeknownst to myself and the 5 other members of the committee, none of us anticipated the impact of that, and so that was a change that was made. Since that time, the ZBA has always continued to use the reasonable amount standard. But at this juncture, since it has come up, I would, with the zoning board of, not approval, but recommendation, I would be inclined to take this actually to the planning commission and actually amend the zoning ordinance, propose an actual text change to replace the word minimum with the word reasonable, so we can all safely go back to our reasonable amount standard that we've been using for now 2 decades.
Okay. So, David, are you also suggesting that the ZBA use its interpretive powers to solve this conflict in language in the section that says reasonable amount, the amount would be the minimum amount?
I am, and I believe that was the understanding that we had over a year ago, and I believe that was also the understanding that the ZBA came to in its March meeting, that the reasonable standard was the best standard. A minimum standard could be a tough hurdle to overcome in decision criteria, considering a minimum amount could be 1 inch, so.
Yeah, okay. Then I think we can talk about it among ourselves. Does anybody have any thoughts on whether or not we should interpret this to mean reasonable amount or not? Any objection to interpreting it as the reasonable amount, to continuing the way that we have done it for 20 years?
I would say the ordinance says what it says, and we already applied the ordinance that says that it says not how we wish it would be. So I would not be supportive of that. I would be supportive of applying the language that's in the ordinance.
Okay, which part, the reasonable amount or the minimum amount?
Whereas reasonable amount is defined as the variance is the minimum amount necessary to mitigate the practice.
That's not a definition, though. That's a section that says reasonable amount. And what it says is the minimum amount.
Well, it tells you that the reasonable amount is, in my mind, defined as the minimum, reasonable is the minimum amount necessary.
Okay. All right, any other thoughts?
Or else the word minimum has no, or else these words would have no meaning and reasonable amount would just be reasonable amount. It would be, right, it would be language that would have no meaning in terms of effect.
Okay. All right, my view is that for 20 years, the ZBA has used reasonable amount as a way to determine whether or not a particular variance request is appropriate. And it helps us avoid a difficult situation where somebody comes in and says, look, my lot is tiny, I need to have a chance for a garage. I need an extra 6 feet on the side of my building to get a garage. And we think, yeah, you know what, you ought to be able to get a garage. And then somebody says, well, yeah, but couldn't he build a 5-foot wall? Couldn't he do this with 5 feet? Well, what about 4.5 feet? And then we run into the minimum amount limitation, making it very difficult for the ZBA to figure out what the right answer in that situation is. We all might think 6 feet is reasonable, but is it, could he build it in only 5.5 feet? Or what about 5 feet 3 inches? That's why I think reasonable amount has made sense for a number of years, and that's why I think that there is a conflict here between the 2 words. It's not in definitions. It's in a section that talks about the criteria.
What did it say before they made it, before 20?
Reasonable amount. It said reasonable amount.
Where the word minimum was, the old ordinance said reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, then what would you change? And I don't mean to monopolize it, but so people,
Yeah.
you got said by piece after this.
Yeah.
What would if the board to which we are a subservient body, in a sense, they write the law, we apply the law. If the board changed the word reasonable to minimum, then obviously it is intended to be a change. They intend minimum to be the standard we're to apply when determining reasonable amount. And I understand it's contrary to the way we've done business. Of course, I'm loath to upset the applicant. so.
But again, what I think our information is that the consultant who drafted these documents made that change, told it to the board, and nobody on the board or anybody else looked at it and said, whoa, this is a change, or what are you doing here? I think it was an oversight. Now, that's what I think. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question, actually? Because in my mind, I think what would affect my understanding of what we might want to be looking for, and maybe what the term should or should not be. What's the burden, like, to say minimum amount versus reasonable amount? Like, what's the burden we need to uphold? What's the burden that the applicant needs to uphold to demonstrate the absolute minimum amount versus a reasonable amount? You know, could these cases all be, you know, could all these cases be litigated because?
Well, it doesn't say absolute minimum.
Okay,
No,
okay.
it doesn't.
Well,
But-
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't tracking, but if I could ask, Brooke, if you know the answer, or David, what's the objective of this action item? What were you looking for?
The ZBA, under state law and also under our zoning ordinance, has the authority to interpret sections of the ordinance where there's the possibility of confusion or different interpretations of a section because of the way it's worded.
That's right, so,
And that authority is in section 2908B.
Yeah, well, so, I'm wondering how many lawyers are on board now.
Four. Is Marty a lawyer, or is he just in it?
So here's the thing, it's already been defined for us, because in variances, in section 430C4, it says the variance is the reasonable amount necessary, and then it's just defined what the reasonable amount is. It says reasonable amount.
that's the
The
one.
variance-
That's the old ordinance.
That's
You-
right. Oh, that's the old one.
You read the old
Yes.
ordinance, which said it was the reasonable amount.
And it was changed to this.
This is the new one.
The
This is
bottom
the
one.
old one. This is the new one.
The reasonable.
The bottom one is the new one.
Old one.
Okay, well, let me ask a dumb question. Do you
Yeah.
want it to say, is this the new one, 2906 variances?
Well,
Reasonable.
yes.
C4. So you wanted to read reasonable amount, the variance is the reasonable amount necessary?
I want permission right now to interpret minimum as reasonable.
But it already says reasonable.
No, it
So-
says minimum.
So I think what you were saying, if you substitute the word reasonable again for variance, you're reading out what the framers wanted to say.
Exactly. Even if it's negligent, it's not first.
And rendering that language superfluous.
Superfluous.
Yes.
Okay, so, that'd be 2 no's.
No, I would still say it's reasonable.
You think minimum is reasonable?
Yes.
But what we're
That's
talking
Because it
about,
says reasonable amount.
Is
It's
a-
the reasonable amount, it's the minimum amount, it's reasonable.
you're saying that whatever we agree on
That's right.
is by
The minimum
definition,
reasonable
the minimum
amount.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little, I don't know about
It's all
that either.
semantic. What I'm concerned about is I want to know what the burden I would have to an applicant would have to demonstrate if we said the minimum. You know, and like Don said, it doesn't say the absolute minimum, but it does say minimum. And so what's the minimum?
Is this,
The minimum
is this a
reasonable
state
amount.
law definition, do you know?
No.
That we've
No.
incorporated?
No.
Beth, would you bring your microphone
Yep.
closer?
Sorry.
No.
That's why I asked what the state objective was, because it's really to decide what it is today. I don't know if we can, but
Well, we're given the authority to interpret where there's possible different understandings of what it ought to mean, and that's,
a permanent thing, or just on a case by case?
No, I think a permanent thing, but I think what David is planning and what is, I think, kind of approved up the chain is we will solve this if we do, if we have the necessary number of votes to interpret it to say that it's the reasonable amount necessary. And at the same time, the planning commission and then the township board will be asked to fix the actual ordinance so that our decision becomes superfluous, as you would approve. And that's, I guess that's where we stand.
So I'm thinking I might want to make a motion that we interpret minimum as the minimum reasonable amount.
The minimum number?
Reasonable amount.
I agree with that, because as a person with a small yard, small lot, who needs garage? I'm thinking, we have a sports car, we have a pickup truck. Are we gonna try to put the bicycle in the garage? Are we gonna try to put a sports car in the garage? Are we trying to put the pickup truck in the garage?
Right.
What's the minimum reasonable amount that a person would,
Yeah.
minimum amount would be, okay, we can get our bicycle in there and
Yeah.
in a broom,
What if
but
you have 18 cars?
That's a good
Then
question.
we have to apply a reasonableness standard.
What's reasonable then?
Well, that would be up to the applicant to demonstrate and for the board to determine.
And it's a case, that is a case-by-case thing, and that's something that I think the ordinance is clear about. You know, how that's applied to each situation is different, and it varies case by case. You know, maybe if you have a yard that's 5,000 acres, 18 cars isn't a big deal.
No, what I'm saying is it the minimum amount required for the user, or is it the minimum amount required for, it's very subjective, isn't it?
So you believe minimum in and of itself is subjective enough that,
You can just say it's reasonable.
So you can only
Like,
vote-
you kinda-
you can only vote no if the request is unreasonable. That's what that leads you to.
Well,
You're making an unreasonable request.
yes, and.
So you're still making a
lengthy-
judgment.
Then lengthy discussion of, well, I think this guy could probably fit this garage in only 5 feet 2 inches, and he's asking for 5 feet 6 inches. Well, let's give him 5'2", not 5'6", because he could make it smaller if he needed to. He
Well,
could
you
make
do-
it another 2 inches smaller. And you could ask him, and he'd go, well, yeah, I can. And so that's why I'd like to be able to say it's the reasonable amount necessary.
Sounds dangerous.
Okay.
You can
Well,
also
it's
say the
not
guy-
dangerous in that we used it for the last 19 years without any problems. We used the reasonable standard.
I have to assume somebody did this on purpose.
Well, yes, somebody did, but if you compare the decision criteria from 2003 to 2020, then what they really did was they picked out a word in the middle of the thing and put it at the beginning, except in the case of the variance. And then they took reasonable amount and put it at the beginning, and somehow or another put minimum in the middle of it.
And Brooke, if I could interject too, so I had to do a little bit of research because as many of you know, the zoning ordinance process that led to this ordinance was 7 years long. So I believe there's 18 different versions of the ordinance as it was going through its review process. And in every single one of those versions, all the way up until the consultant got in, the verbiage in the words, the language for criteria 4, always stayed the same. It was never changed. It was only at the end in a 17-page report from the consultant that the change was recommended, and at that point, that's when the change went to the board, along with all the other. So I would tend to agree with Brooke. I think it was honestly an oversight and something that just nobody caught in that process. But it was never changed, and it had been years in the making, and dozens of people had eyes on that, and
Okay, well, I think we're at a point where I'd like to make a motion, and It'll
Okay.
either
Yeah.
pass or fail. And here, I actually wrote it out because it was long enough.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
You have a copy for me, Brooke?
I do. You want to pass that on over? Well, I used to give away all my time.
Let me just,
You guys share. Okay, there you go. So my motion is that, based on our discussion, Section 2906C4 of the Dexter Township zoning ordinance, the ordinance states that the amount of variance to be granted if the zoning board of appeals, the ZBA, finds a practical difficulty exists, is presently the reasonable amount. The variance is the minimum amount necessary to mitigate the practical difficulty. Using the conflicting terms reasonable amount and minimum amount caused this section to be unclear and subject to multiple interpretations. Acting pursuant to the authority granted in MCLA 125.3603 and Section 29.08B of the Dexter Township Ordinance, the Zoning Board of Appeals finds that Section 20.06C4 of the Dexter Township Ordinance is not clear and could have more than one meaning. Therefore, the ZBA determines the standard to be applied is reasonable amount, and the words minimum amount shall be disregarded. That's my motion. So far, there's no second.
can I amend it?
Well, you can second it before you decide what to do with it, or not. It fails for lack of a second. Maybe there's another motion.
All right, I'll make a motion. So it's literally what Brooke just said, Section 2906C4 of the Dexter Township zoning ordinance. The ordinance states the amount of variance to be granted if the Zoning Board of Appeals, the ZBA, finds that a practical difficulty exists. For a reasonable amount, the variance is the minimum amount necessary to mitigate the practical difficulty. Use of the conflicting terms, reasonable amount and minimum amount, shall cause this section to be unclear and subject to multiple interpretations. Acting pursuant to the authority granted MCLA 125/3603 and Section 2908B of the Dexter Township zoning ordinance, the Zoning Board of Appeals finds that Section 20.06C4 of the Dexter Township ordinance is not clear and could have more than one meaning. Therefore, the ZBA determines that the standard to be applied is a reasonable minimum amount.
All right, can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see if
Wait a
there's a
minute.
second for this motion.
Is just the rest of this, are you then reading out the rest? of
Strike the
those?
rest.
Okay.
I have not heard a second. I think we may just be able to move on here without solving any problems.
So you're saying, take out the rest and say reasonable minimum amount.
And then take out the
So
rest.
Take out the rest.
Because it gives meaning to both terms.
I think that's good. I think that's
Okay, so you're seconding
I
that
second.
motion.
I
Okay,
second it.
we have a second, now we can discuss.
All right, so MCL 125.3.603 says, we can hear and decide questions that arise in administration of the zoning ordinance, including the interpretation of the zoning maps,
And
and may adopt rules to govern its procedures sitting on the zoning board of appeals. They also hear and decide that matters referred to the zoning board of appeals or upon which the zoning board of appeals is required to pass under a zoning ordinance adopted under order department decision determination made by an administrative official or body charged with enforcement of the zoning ordinance adopted in this act. I don't see anything there about striking any part of an ordinance.
Well, we're not striking it, we're just giving it meaning.
we're not.
Well, that's what this motion says. It says disregard it.
That, I just took that out in
To
my
say what?
motion. Strike that last phrase.
That's it?
Everything after the and, get rid of. Therefore, the ZBA determines that the standard to be applied is the reasonable minimum amount. And that way I don't have to peg an applicant down as to why that very last inch is absolutely necessary.
Sure you do, because you still have to, you're still using the term minimum.
I'm not using the term absolute.
It wasn't ever in there.
No,
Absolute
but
was
now,
never in
now
there.
there's no question. Reasonable minimum amount. What do you find reasonable? What do I find reasonable?
Yeah, exactly. And then, and so
Reasonable
we're going
minimum.
back and forth with, well, I think that he could probably, anyway, all right.
I think it's
Don, I'm sorry, I did not print out a copy of MCLA.
I got that right here if you want it.
I do. This is just not the version that I believe I most recently read. So I don't have any comment on that, and I'm sorry I didn't bring a copy. Talk among yourselves.
I'm happy to strike that portion from the motion.
Okay.
What
Oh,
portion?
the reference to 125-3603.
Yeah.
So how would it read in your proposed motion?
Well, just,
Reasonable amount, the variance is the reasonable amount necessary to be expected.
The reasonable minimum amount.
The reasonable minimum amount.
Yeah. That way I've now given weight to both words, right? The reasonable amount, as it's prefacing the rest of the language, and the rest of the language which recites minimum. So we may interpret it to be the reasonable minimum amount.
you know what, I think that that's a good solution to move us on with having a change made to the ordinance. And I think if we spend any more time on this,
It would be
it's
too much
probably
time.
a waste.
It's gonna be pitchforks and flamethrowers.
Yeah. So, so I'm
Some
comfortable.
people out here are like,
I know, sorry.
It's like sleeping bags and Somniacs.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Is there any more discussion on Beth's motion, taking out the reference to MCLA, but leaving in the reference to the portion of the township ordinance that gives us the authority to resolve interpretations? You want to see
So under
that
the
language?
motion, would now we read it to, would the resolution say, is it resolution?
Yeah,
Say the minimum amount is the reasonable minimum amount.
yep,
Okay, I'll vote for
okay. All right, then, do you need anything else for the record, ma'am? And you know what our motion now
I'll
is.
give you the copy that I'm,
Thank you.
okay.
Okay. All right, well, let's do a vote on this. Catherine? Speak.
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Yes, but I want to qualify it if I
Mhm.
can. I'm only voting for it because the preface of the ordinance says the reasonable
Mhm.
amount. So I think it's fair to interpret it the minimum as the reasonable minimum amount.
Mhm.
Okay. And Peter?
I will not bore you with my interpretation of the rules of statutory construction, other than to say I will vote no.
Okay, no, and the chair votes yes. So the motion passes, we have an interpretation, and for everyone else who's here, we can move on.
Okay. I will be giving this to the secretary
Okay, good.
before I forget. Thank you, Janice.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. So let me get back to wherever our real agenda is. So we're ready now for item 2, which is ZBA 23, case 23 ZBA 002, Keith Marshall. Starting out, does anyone on the ZBA have any conflicts or ex parte contacts to announce? Hearing none, we can move on to staff presentation.
Thank you. I take it everybody had an opportunity to go out to Winston Road and visit the property. So the applicant intends to renovate the existing home, which is 872 square feet, and a 516 square foot barn just to the north of it. The addition is proposed will go between those two structures, actually formally connecting them. So what is two separate structures now will become one single-family home with the addition. All the proposed dimensions of the proposed addition fit within the buildable area, except for in the rear of the property. This is a this is a lake residential property, but it's not a lakefront property, so it does have a formal rear yard, which requires a 30-foot setback. The applicant will be going 21 feet from the rear parcel line, and that is what they're requesting a variance for. I, like all of you, have been out to the site. It is a nice property, but the structures are in definite need of repair. So this seems a fairly minimal, kind of, and somewhat of an elegant solution to this property and connecting the two structures. So that's really all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I do not believe the applicant is here tonight, but I believe the applicant's wives are here, so we do have representation, so they will be here to answer questions as well.
Questions for the Director of Planning and Zoning?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So as I understand it, he's just filling in this area within the footprint. Is that-
The shaded area, he's basically filling in between, and if you look at the floor plans, you can see that there's a mudroom that will be added, there's a hallway, there's two relatively small bedrooms in the back. It's a fairly modest building addition to these two structures.
And the shed is already closer than that, right?
The shed and the home are already existing.
And the garage is already closer than the 21 feet as it is, right?
The garage is actually at 23 feet right now, so.
That's because of the way the property line.
Yeah. So currently they already have some non-conforming with that shed, but the actual new additions will be 21 feet.
Now, the advert referred to a reduced front yard setback as well. Did that turn out you didn't need?
So that one I did as a precaution because of that tiny little sliver, and because this is one of those parcels too, that it's not a perfectly square box. It has some curvilinear kind of elements to it, and I had to confirm that even that little sliver was out of the front setback, and it's 27 and a half feet, so, but I thought better to be cautious just in case, so.
Thank you.
Mhm.
David, if I may prod a little bit further on the garage and how
Sure.
far the garage is. I'm looking at this, and it looks like one corner of the garage is 24.6 feet back, and then the other corner of the garage is 23?
Mhm.
Or does the addition bump out by a foot, 1.6 feet?
The addition bumps out from the actual, I believe it goes out 2 feet further than the closest point for the garage at that point is 23 feet.
Okay.
So that it actually bumps out 2 feet further than the closest part of the garage there, which is why it's 21 instead of 23.
Okay.
Mhm.
David,
Yes.
what's the side yard setback on the south side?
On the south side, so being lake residential, it's 5 feet. The actual dimensions, the applicant didn't provide. It would be obviously significantly more than 5 feet. There is buildable area on the south side of the property, in which they are putting on a deck to stay in that buildable area. But as of, I did not receive the exact dimensions of it, but I would say conservatively, it's 40 to 50 feet.
Okay, there's a lot of space over there.
There is a lot of space. There's also some foliage and existing trees, and, but yeah, I do believe the idea was to stay as much within the existing footprint, so to speak, with this addition by connecting the two structures, rather than going south and going that route.
Any other questions for the applicant? I'm sorry, for the Director of Planning and Zoning? Then I think we are ready petitioners to tell us what they want to do. Which one of you would like to come up and tell us? Or both? You want to tell us your names and addresses so that we can get it in the record?
Sure. I'm Christy Mead, 11143 Hearthside Drive, Pinckney.
I'm Pat Marshall, 4354 Emu Drive in Pinckney.
Tell us.
So we purchased the property for resale. So we had to go through it, and we plan on adding the dimensions that we discussed as far as adding on, because right now the structure is just like a one-bedroom home. So we wanted to bump it out to add 2 more bedrooms, to just add more value for a nice family to come in, or a retiree or something like that. So
The house will be for resale, and we're adding on 800 square feet. A total would be 1,500 square feet.
Okay. Anything else that we need to know?
That's it.
Questions of the applicants?
Why do you need to go that 1.5 feet?
I'm sorry.
Why do you need to bump out that extra? Yeah, I understand the 21 feet, but the setback's 30 feet. And even if you were to follow the garage back, you would be at 23 feet or 24 feet from the setback if you were just to cut a straight line back. Why do you need that extra 1.5 feet on the southwest corner of the house? You know, what is it that makes this a practical difficulty where you can't build to the side of the home, to the south of the home, you have to go out to the west?
I think the reason why didn't want to go out south, because we, if we're going to resell it, we wanted to make a nice yard, a fire pit, for a family or, retirees to enjoy. And if we go out on the side, then that's not going to leave us much room as far as yard space in that direction. So.
Do you know if there's any gas line, plumbing, or anything towards the rear of what's delineated in the plans as the dining room and kitchen? Are there any gas lines or anything that are presently there that would require, so to speak, that the kitchen end where it does in the plans?
I don't think so, but I'm not for sure.
Okay.
Other questions of the applicant? I'm concerned because what you're asking us to do is give you a variance, give you the right to break the law, which says that you're supposed to be 30 feet from the rear lot line. The home already is closer than it should be, and it's been there for a long time, and so nobody's going to say anything about how close it currently is. But then our job is to say, is there something that requires you, the only thing you can do is go toward your neighbor to the west in order to get the additional space inside the home that you want to get. And when we look at the drawing and see that there's 40-some feet in that south yard that you could build into, it's hard to see how you meet the practical difficulty requirement, which says that you need to do this because it's the only way that you can get the kind of use and enjoyment that other homes in the neighborhood would be able to get. And I think it's wonderful that you're going to renovate this house. It clearly will benefit from your tender loving care, no question about that. But the problem that I have for the ZBA is looking at it and saying, well, clearly this is a practical difficulty. You're forced to go west because there's no other place to go with additional space inside the home. And that's my problem. Any other questions for the applicants? Is there anything else that either of you would like to tell us about any of this, having heard our concerns?
No, thank you so much.
Okay.
Dave, if this did not have an existing structure, is this a build, if there was nothing on the lot, is this a buildable lot? Could you build a house on this lot?
Yeah, it's an 11,000 square foot lot, so for a lake lot, it's a fairly good sized lot. And it does have its limitations. I mean, obviously, it's an 11,000 square foot lot, but it does have a buildable area on it, yeah.
It's a nice street, just a nice street. The house does need a lot of work.
It does. It really benefit from TLC.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any thoughts before we go through the decision criteria?
Public
The
comment.
Oh, sorry. Exactly. Thank you so much. Anybody who's here who'd like to speak to us, sure, come on up and talk to us.
All right, I'm Brian Staub, STAUB. I have two properties at 9631, which is immediately next door on the west side, and at 9634 Winston, kitty corner. Looking at what you're talking about, Brooke, I hear what you're saying, because I've been through these myself. I hear what you're saying, but myself and a few of the other neighbors, we support what they're trying to do. It does need to be beautified. We would all appreciate that, but I get what you're saying as far as the rules and whatnot, but I do support it.
Good, thank you. Come on up, tell us your name, tell us where you're from.
I'm a resident of Winston Road. I'm down at the other end, however. My house is in Livingston County, but my shed belongs to you. So I pay taxes on that, which is a whole nother matter I may need to see you about. But, I'm delighted that somebody has bought the house and certainly going to do renovations on it. That particular side of the road is a little more crowded than what we experience down at the other end. I know when I turn off Dexter Pickney and I try to get onto Winston Road, you have a fairly big or a fairly small curve. And you have traffic coming this way, you have traffic coming out of the lakefront the other way, and it's a relatively small road, and you have to be kind of cautious. So whatever the board decides, whether they connect the house with the garage and go south closer to the neighbor, which I haven't been privy to the plan, so I'm not quite sure what's going on, or if they go west into the more vacant area where appears to be sort of an overhang shed type or overhang patio type area. The biggest consideration I think the board needs to make is that it is kind of a crowded area down there. A lot of cars coming from a lot of different directions. So whatever is done, please keep in mind, the traffic and how that road functions, because it can be very difficult, especially in winter months and high water level months like we're dealing with right now. So, but I am thrilled somebody bought the property, and I look forward to the changes on whatever you decide. But keep in mind the traffic.
Thank you. Anyone else here who would like to speak?
My name is Heidi Hollenbeck, and I am a resident on Winston Drive as well. 9686 is my address. And I am excited that this property, this blighted place, is going to be renovated. A number of years ago we had a fire at Portage Lake. And putting houses closer together, in my mind, can be dangerous. What I see, the advantage of the plan that they've submitted, which I haven't seen, but I understand that, you know, they want to go back to vacant property. I think the advantage is that you can't even see it from the road. It's not going to put it closer to anybody in case there was a fire. And so maybe those are a few practical considerations to think about as you make your decision. And I know you'll make a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak?
I'm Sue Kozowski. I live across the street and down a few houses from this, and I'm very thankful that somebody has bought it and is renovating it and fixing it up. My husband and I have no objection to the plan. I haven't seen the actual plan, but my understanding is the connection between the two. So we're happy that this has been asked for and would hope that you could. I just want to, for my own personal thing, I came before not this board, but a board that was before you in 2006, asking for a variance for a garage. They did not accept it, so therefore I had to sell my car because it didn't fit in the garage that I was asked to build. I had to buy a much smaller car so it would fit, and I thought having granted me that extra foot would have made a big difference for me, but that's my own personal thing. It has nothing to do with her situation. So, you know, I kind of have to laugh at your minimum, absolute, whatever, but I won't go into that anymore. But anyways, thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak to the board on this application? Okay. Thought? Comments?
You summed it up, but I think it's the same.
Yeah, I really want this house to get fixed up, but I don't think that we can in good conscience say to the neighbor to the west, we're going to give a variance to build something closer to your lot line where it's possible to expand the footprint of the house substantially by just moving the structure, expanding the structure to the south. And that's my concern. I think we have a real problem of practical difficulty.
I was really hoping there was a gas line there, some sort of utility that.
Some reason that it
Yeah.
couldn't go that way.
Yeah.
So the shaded part is the part that's going to be added on?
I think the shaded, I can't, why don't I look at my own picture?
Yeah, Captain, the shaded part.
Okay. And so the barn
That's already
is,
there.
right, that's a non-conforming structure already, right?
Right.
And so the new section's only going to go out another foot?
But I think they figured it was another couple of feet almost.
Another 2 feet past the barn?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, that's what I remember.
So maybe I'm confused here about directions. So doesn't the back of the house face south?
The back of the house faces west.
Okay. Yep, I'll look at that like this. Okay, so, but there's nobody back there, there's just the road.
No, back there is somebody
West.
else's property.
No, it's the road, isn't it?
It's the road, the next thing behind the house is the road. Yeah,
It's
it's
like a
60 feet.
forested scrub area.
Right.
Leads up to the road, that's what's in back of the house.
Yes.
But nobody owns that area back there.
Somebody owns that.
That's what I thought.
It's a parcel.
It's a parcel.
Oh, it is a parcel.
Potentially
Yeah.
buildable parcel?
Yeah.
Well, there's a few existing structures, but it's predominantly just a wooded parcel.
Okay, but potentially buildable is what I guess my question.
It counts towards somebody else's square feet.
Right.
It counts towards somebody else's square footage.
If
You
I
know,
have
their
development
lot.
rights almost attached to it in terms
Yes.
of creating a lot of a particular size.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that it just went straight to the road, that was all the property.
it goes to a rear property line, there's another property that abuts that, and that's between Dexter Picking and the property lines. It's a fairly large north-south property.
That's what I thought. So,
I would support this even if it was just empty back there, because this person could build whatever they want to build on a large portion of the lot. You know, it's, if they want to have a house, they can have a house that's perfectly conforming.
Problem is the cheapest, easiest.
Yeah, or it might be a good plan, easiest plan.
all right, anything else that we need to talk about before we do our decision criteria?
No, I guess that clears it up for me then, because I thought the property just went to the road.
Okay.
I'm sorry, ladies.
Yeah.
They're still deliberating.
Thank you.
Somebody has to speak up, bro.
Thank you, James. Sorry.
This is my first.
Brian, you're gonna have to give us a chance to talk, okay? So, in any event, we're moving on now to the decision criteria. It's gonna take just one vote from each of the board members. The request is for a reduced rear yard setback of 21 feet rather than the 30 feet required. Starting with Catherine, yes or no?
Oh, here, I'll give you mine.
Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I did not give you a good lead-in.
The letters,
Let me
too.
try that one more time, okay? Oh, I thought you would. So the first criteria is practical difficulty. That's 2906C1. The strict application of the terms of this ordinance would constitute a practical difficulty, which is our major issue here.
No.
And Beth?
No.
And Don?
No.
And Peter?
No.
And the chair votes no as well. 2, physical condition. The practical difficulty is due to some physical condition peculiar to the property involved. Catherine?
No.
Beth?
No, because I believe there's no
There's no
practical
practical
difficulty.
difficulty. Don?
No.
Peter?
No.
And the chair votes no as well, again, because there is no practical difficulty. 3, self-created, 2906C3. The practical difficulty is not self-created. Catherine?
There's no practical difficulty, so it's,
True,
so,
but they haven't done anything to make it worse.
right, no, so.
Beth?
Again, no, because there's no practical difficulty.
Okay, I'm gonna say yes because they didn't do anything to make it work, although there's no practical difficulty. Don?
No.
And Peter?
I have the yes on that.
Okay. 4, reasonable amount necessary. The variance is a reasonable amount necessary to mitigate the practical difficulty. And Catherine?
Reasonable amount?
Yeah, do I understand?
Can you define that?
This is what we've been doing all along for years.
No.
Beth?
No, and I'm gonna say it's neither the reasonable nor the minimum amount necessary.
Okay. Don?
No.
And the chair votes no as well. 5, public health, safety, and welfare. Approval of the variance will not be injurious to the public health, safety, and welfare. Catherine?
I think, no, it will not be injurious.
Yes, it
Is
will
it?
not.
Yes, it will not be injurious.
That'd be yes.
Okay.
Beth?
I would have to say yes, there's been no evidence presented as to how this would be injurious to health, safety, and welfare.
Don?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well on that one. 6, adjacent properties. Approval of the variance will not affect the use of the adjacent properties or the area in a substantially adverse manner. Catherine?
No.
Beth?
Yeah, I haven't seen any evidence that it would be, it would affect the use of adjacent properties.
Are you back to yes there, Catherine?
I'm saying that, yes, it could affect the,
So you're a no on
You're
that
a no,
one.
okay.
And Beth
Whereas
is,
I'm a yes, because I
Yes.
just haven't seen any evidence of
Okay.
that.
Don?
No.
Peter?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And the intent of the ordinance, approval of the variance is consistent with the intent and purposes of this ordinance. Catherine?
approval would be consistent with the intent?
Well, has it met the other requirements for approval?
No.
Then I would say
No.
probably no. Beth?
No.
Don?
No.
Peter?
No.
And the chair votes no as well. I'm sorry to inform you that you haven't met, and we're going to have a motion.
Yeah.
We're going to have a motion. And now we're going to have a motion about whether or not the variance should be approved. Do you want to make the motion?
I will make the motion. I am going to make a motion to deny the variance requested for 9623 Winston Road, tax ID number D0402402022, petition number 23 ZBA 002, to the applicant Keith Marshall, requesting a rear yard setback of 21 feet as opposed to the 30 feet required in section 7.02 of the ordinance.
Second.
Okay. Catherine?
Yes.
You want to, yes?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Don? And Peter? And I vote yes as well. You can tell your neighbors really want you to do this. Expand your footprint to the south, come back to David, and get it done. Everybody wants you to do this.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, where's my list of things up here? We're on to public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anything that anybody would like to talk to us about things that aren't on tonight's agenda?
I sort of would, I'm going to piggyback on what she was talking about. Can you say, or maybe not say, what's happening with Mr. Bieski's property?
You know, it's funny that you raised that issue, because once we got done with our meeting, I was going to ask David if he knew anything about what was going on with Mr. Bieski's property. And maybe it would be better not to do that in public hearing.
Okay, that's fine.
Any other public comment?
I just really want to reiterate the traffic. You know, when you're sitting there looking at Craig Keevy's real estate office and you're trying to get out on Dexter Road, I really invite you all to try to do that. When the traffic's coming from Pinckney, they're coming 45, 50 miles an hour, and you only have a short moment to get out of that driveway there at Winston and either turn, well, especially if you're turning towards the yacht club. Anything that's done to that corner, certainly home is going to be a huge improvement, but anything that is done in the site view is going to be critical that you all totally understand that, because you could easily get killed trying to pull out of that road right now. Not to mention if there's one or two vehicles going in opposite directions. So please, whatever you do, please pay attention to that.
Thank you. Any other comment? All right, we're on to concerns of zoning board of appeals members, director of planning and zoning, and recording secretary. And for the recording secretary, I just want to say I'll try to do better next time. Janice, do you have any issues that you'd like to discuss with us?
Welcome back.
Yeah. We are good, it's good to be back. David, issues,
No issues, no concerns.
board members?
I very briefly, I would, because I've got a very simple mind, I would love to see with an application, a very clear picture of how they're either expanding into I keep having to search when I look at these drawings, because I admit I'm not good at looking at construction drawing and elevation, of exactly how it is they're expanding into a non-conforming area. That would help me a lot. If just someone's just crosshatched that shows this is where they're going, that's non-conforming, that'd be very helpful to me.
Anything else, Peter? I'd like to piggyback on Peter and say that I'm pretty sure that our applicants are supposed to provide us with a plot plan that shows all the setbacks. And
We usually see that.
well, we sometimes see that, and we didn't see that in this one. And I really think that it would be good if we didn't schedule a hearing until we get a plot plan that conforms to the requirements of our ordinance of showing setbacks. And I think the ordinance says that unless you have decided that they're not, that it doesn't have to be there. But I think in this case, to discuss their situation best with them, it would have been nice to say, well, it's actually 38.7 feet from where your property now ends to the beginning of the side setback or something.
Sure, and typically, yeah, the builder does provide all of that. In this instance, the side yard wasn't a subject of the design, so it wasn't provided.
Well, but again, I want to stress for builders that if they're going to send their client for a variance, they better comply with the requirements of the zoning ordinance that says, give us a plot plan that shows setbacks.
I mean, don't we have to, in order to decide whether something is reasonable or not, don't we have to have a good understanding of exactly what the lot is?
We do.
In terms of.
We do, and I think that it would be good if we got that. Any other issues? You know what? That means we're at the end of the agenda here, and so we are adjourned.
Thank you, Don.
It's really a bummer. I'm looking at it going, wait a minute.
Yes or no?
What am I- yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's
What
really.
did I agree to?
It took me a long time to like get